It can be hard to pick a favorite anime. Like, I can rattle off a long list of favorites, in no particular order, but to pick an anime out of the bunch and definitively say that this one stands above the rest is a difficult choice to make. And once you do come to that conclusion, it can be hard for a newcomer to then overtake something you've bona fide in your mind as your favorite. Beastars might just do that to me. I don't want to cement that opinion just yet. I'm gonna wait and see if this honeymoon phase passes and if I still feel the same way, but suffice it to say, I really liked Season 2 of Beastars. Which is crazy because up until I started watching Season 2, I hadn't given much thought to the series, only watching the second season out of a passing interest and obligation. But as soon as I started watching that first episode, I was immediately pulled back into the world of Beastars, as it reminded me of all the great things in Season 1 as it pushed them even further. That, of course, being the amazing characters. Before we get started, I do want to say this video does contain a lot of minor spoilers for both seasons of Beastars. Nothing that should directly spoil the fun, but enough that I thought it'd be nice to bring up now. I've already made a video featuring Beastars where I compare it to Brand New Animal, and feel free to watch that one if you so chose. It's got its ups and downs in terms of video quality, but I stand by everything I said in it. One of those things being this idea of the narrative focal point, and how Beastars uses the lens of animal people society to focus on the people of said society. And before I even start talking about the characters, I want to talk about that society, because it's at the beating heart of Beastars. Among the many different species of animal in Beastars exists a clear dichotomy between carnivores and herbivores. And it's more than just carnivores tend to be bigger and stronger. It's that they're biologically designed to not just eat herbivores, but to actively want to eat herbivores. And I gotta say, personally, no thank you. I could not imagine anything close to that kind of life. One thing my mind wandered to constantly while watching Beastars Season 2 is just how much of a miracle it is that there is a functioning society, because there are so many problems hiding right in plain sight, held together by just a thread, and people just accept it to maintain the status quo. But what actually is the status quo? Well, I don't really think there is one answer, if there is any. And that's kind of the point of Beastars. At its core, Beastars is a story about a bunch of characters as they all reach their own conclusions about the society they live in and how to act in it. What makes Beastars characters so great is how they're all written around this theme. Take any character and they could be broken down into 4 essential pieces that define who they are and their relationship with the status quo, which I'm affectionately calling the 4 Ps of Beastars. Starting with predisposition. Who a character is, both physically as well as their past. See, genetics play a huge role in Beastars, greatly affecting how you see the world and how the world sees you. A character like Legoshi, who is this massive grey wolf male, is going to be predisposed to different things from every other character. Not just on a macro level like between him and say Haru, the dwarf rabbit, but between other carnivores like Bill the tiger, or other canines like Jack the retriever, or even Juno, a female of the same species. A character's predisposition can also be greatly affected by their past, most notably of which would be Louis, who, yes, I called him Lewis in my first video. That's my bad. I read the first volume of the manga before watching the anime, and to me, it read as Lewis, and I just convinced myself they were cutting off the S sound in Japanese. Again, that's on me, coach. Anyways, growing up, Louis was sold on the black market until he was bought and brought in by Oguma, head of the Horns conglomerate. And it was not only his time spent at the black market, but growing up with this image of a powerful herbivore that was really formative to who Louis becomes as a person. A minor example of this can be seen in how Els, who was in the drama club with the recently devoured Tem, another alpaca, acts very scared and nervous at the sight of Legoshi, which, if you think about it, is due almost exclusively to the fact that Legoshi, as a large carnivore, is predisposed to this kind of fear and hesitance from herbivores. Next, it's important to look at how each character is uniquely positioned in the society of Beastars. There's a distinct parallel to be drawn between Louis and Juno, who both aim to be the next Beastar, a prestigious title given to those who can lead society and act as a beacon of hope. However, despite her growing popularity, the biggest difference between Juno and Louis is their positions. One's still at the starting line as a freshman girl, the other a third year, president of the drama club, star of the show, having already gained the school's favor as the next potential Beastar.
In Season 2, we meet Ibuki, just after watching someone kill the boss of his mob, Shishigumi.
And we get this scene that totally juxtaposes the insanity of that moment as Ibuki and the other lions talk casually amongst themselves about who might lead Shishigumi next, or if they need to merge with a sister organization. Again, this is a moment where the 4 Ps of Beastars play into one another, as Ibuki is a lion who has only ever known the life of crime, and so because of this predisposition, his current position in Shishigumi isn't one of malice or evil, but just daily life. Which brings us to P number 3, perception of the status quo. What each character thinks the standard is, their views on society, especially as it relates to carnivores and herbivores. As told to by his father, Ibuki plays the role of king of beasts, that the strength of a carnivore is a weapon to be used and the source of a lion's happiness. The first conversation we see from Legoshi, that between him and Els, sets up clearly how Legoshi views the status quo, that the power dynamic between carnivores and herbivores has one side terrified of the other, and that being feared and loathed is a part of the curse of being a carnivore. The culmination of all these things brings us to the character's paradigm, and that's how they choose to react and approach the status quo. While every character has their own paradigm, let's start first by breaking it down into 2 main categories, conformers and confronters. A conformer stays within their view of the status quo, either choosing to actively, like how Legoshi tries his best to suppress his carnivorous instincts, or passively, like how Bill views the same parts of being a carnivore as something completely natural and doesn't shy away from embracing those carnivorous aspects of his life. The opposite would then be confronters, characters who aren't satisfied with the status quo they've come to know, and actively take steps to live out their ideals. All Haru ever wanted was to be seen beyond just the small, helpless Haru, and simply be recognized as Haru. And the only place she's ever truly felt that was in bed. In her view of the status quo, that small herbivores are pitied, Haru stakes her own claim where she can feel like she is being seen as an equal, even if that claim labels her a whore. The 4 Ps of Beastars are the foundation which each character is built upon, and in turn the story of Beastars is built off the backs of these characters. The true genius of this lies in the fact that none of these characters are static or exist in isolation. Because there is no true right answer to what the status quo is or how to approach it, there are moments in Beastars in which a character's perception or paradigm is challenged, and they're powerful moments as the character is left with only 2 options: double down on their stance or experience a paradigm shift. A brilliant example of this in action is in episode 6 of season 1, where carnivore members of the drama club have stumbled into the black market. Bill, excited at the prospect to eat an old man's finger, encourages his friends to split the cost with him, and we see 2 different reactions. First is that of Legoshi, who again has this perception that his carnivorous side is a problem and should be suppressed, and therefore is very against the idea of eating the finger. Secondly is Aoba, and we can see all 4 Ps play out in what he says to Legoshi. He acknowledges his predisposition as a carnivore, sees the black market and has the perception that it's just another facet of a functioning society. To Aoba, the only thing in between him and eating meat was his position in school as a student, and here at the black market, he's gonna conform to eating the finger. That is, until we meet Alba again later, having run away from the black market, because when confronted with his own perception of the status quo, his mind flashing to his herbivore friends like Sanu and Louis, Alba experienced a paradigm shift, choosing not to conform to the status quo but to live out what he believes is right. It's a really beautiful moment, and it's about more than just Alba experiencing this paradigm shift, but also how him and Legoshi come together in this moment. Because Beastars is at its best when the lives of its characters intersect and intertwine. On his own, Louis is already a very interesting character, who sees the gap between carnivores and herbivores as an issue of power, and takes aim at overcoming that disparity by gaining as much power as he can. In one of the first scenes we meet Louis, he can be seen harshly berating Zoe for not memorizing his lines, mocking the goat. The way he's animated head on to be showing his teeth, as if to mimic how carnivores bare their fangs. That's a really intriguing setup to Louis' character in its own right, which is only enhanced when it's directly contrasted to Legoshi, who stood back timidly during this, only to use his strength to stop a punch aimed at Louis, baring his fangs not simply with intimidation in mind, but to de-escalate the situation. If the status quo is the line art of Beastars, then it's painted with the contrast and similarities of the characters' perceptions and paradigms. When characters come together, it can create these beautiful moments of hope, like with Legoshi and Alba, or in Season 2 when Kibi the Anteater has his arm accidentally ripped off by Tao, and lets the Black Panther touch his arm, neither character wanting to let this incident define their status quo. Conversely, the contrast between characters can be used for tension. It's something that can be felt in the relationship between Legoshi and Haru. Both see themselves as disadvantaged in their status quo, and have to navigate that awkwardness. And when this tension breaks, it can lead to outright conflict. Season 2 of Beastars climaxes in Legoshi fighting the culprit behind the devouring of Tem, acknowledging multiple times the fact that if this were simply a matter of justice, he would have already called the police. To quote Legoshi from the final episode, The Taste of Rebellion, "Winning or losing is no longer important to them or me. We're both showing our own way of life as carnivores. I need to confront them to the end." Legoshi is not fighting just because the act of devouring Tem was wrong, but that at a fundamental level, how this character perceives the status quo and their way of life are flawed. There is a lot of thematic scoring, such as Hope of This World, which plays well when there is a spark of hope. You hear it when Tao touches Kibi's hand, when Legoshi discovers his first lead to who devoured Tem, and in the moments leading up to their confrontation. And I think it's interesting if you compare this season's ending to the first, both ending on a conversation between Legoshi and Haru, but where Season 1 ends with the track Wolf and Rabbit, Season 2 ends playing many stories. Because Beastars is about more than just Legoshi and Haru. It's about a whole cast of characters, all with their own predispositions, who are uniquely positioned in their broken society. It's about the paradigms they take because of their perceptions. Beastars is a story about many stories. About characters trying to find their place in the world as they face the status quo. And I think that's really special.